I'm Carrie Cassidy from Protζεκτ Κάμελοτ, and I'm here with Niara Isley.
And so when I got regressed, Bud said, I want you to go to a time that seems significant to you in January of 1980 when you were in the Air Force. And immediately I found myself standing on the deck of the radar van, because radar vans are like the back of a semi, like the trailer, and then it's filled with electronic equipment. And then there's a deck so that you can kind of climb up to it and down with stairs. I was standing on the deck of the radar van. It was night. I was terrified, and there were saucers in the sky. There were like a lot of them. You know, I would say at least 9, maybe more, but my attention was riveted on the one that was closest because I could hear sound coming from it, and I could see it quite well. I mean, there wasn't a lot of detail on it. I was seeing the bottom of it more than the top. It was like a translucent metal skin on the bottom. It had a circular feature in the center. There was a sound coming from it like speakers at a rock concert when no music is coming through and they're just kind of sitting there humming and maybe there's a little crackle.
Mm-hmm. That's a very good description.
Yeah, and I was looking at this thing, and any wonder at seeing such a craft was completely blotted out by just how terrified I was feeling.
Were you with other people?
I was with 2 other people that had been running the radar with me that night, and we were given fatigues aware with no rank insignia, no name tags. We were forbidden to speak to each other beyond what was necessary to run the test.
Was that customary?
No, not at all. They were really, they had us very tightly under control, and there were guns involved. I found out in a later hypnosis session, some years later when I went back and looked at this again, that I was hauled out of my motel room in the middle of the night at gunpoint. So it's no wonder I was terrified out there. And I only had a secret security clearance, and my question was, you know, because I was familiar with security classifications and the hierarchy of them, and I'm thinking, why on earth am I seeing something that has to be incredibly highly classified, and I only have a secret security clearance, and that in itself terrified me.
Okay, and now when you said there are saucers in the sky, can you describe how many and the size of them, and were they all identical in the way they were shaped and so on?
They all looked very similar. I wouldn't say they were identical, but they all looked very similar, and again, I was terrified, and I was really just looking at the one closest.
Were they all the same size?
That was hard to determine because they were varying distances.
Were they moving or were they hovering?
They were hovering.
All of them?
Mm-hmm. They were hovering, and some of them were kind of, you know, tipping a little. But they were hovering, and there was a little motion. I mean, they're tipping, and then maybe a little bit of this, but they were mostly all hovering.
Okay, and they were in miles. I don't know. Yeah. Would you say sort of a valley or?
Yeah, they were kind of in the valley. I would say that they were covering an area maybe 10, 12 miles square around the radar.
And just hovering?
Yes.
And size-wise, each saucer would be approximately, is there any way for you to?
I'm not really good with those kind of dimensions,
yeah,
but I would guess 30 to 50 feet in diameter. That was just a guess.
Okay, so That's not massive, right?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay, so go on with your story.
So I'm looking at these things. I'm scared. I'm not talking to the two people on either side of me. There are some people talking inside the radar van, discussing, I think, the results of the test, but I couldn't hear really what they were saying. I could just hear voices. A period of time went by. They came out of the radar van, and we were put, me and the other two people, were put on a bus, like an old school bus, painted Air Force blue, and the windows were painted over. And they took us by the bus to what I think was Area 51. And when we got to our destination, we were taken off the bus and we were taken to a medical facility, sat in a fairly large square room, and all of us were sat in these chairs. There were lights coming in from a hallway behind where we were seated, kind of partially illuminating the room, but they kept the lights off in that room. And then one by one, they came and got each one of us, or called our name, and then we went into a little room that was adjacent to the main waiting room. When it was my turn to go in there, there was an armed security guard in there standing at parade rest, and I was told to lay down fully clothed on a stainless steel examining table. So I did that. Again, I had to wait, scared to death, and finally a guy in a white lab coat came in, walked past the security guard at the foot of the table, up around the right side of the table, and he said, "Stay calm," in a deadpan voice 3 times. And when he got up beside the right side of my head, kind of like in one smooth move, he'd had a hypodermic needle kind of hidden in his hand in the sleeve of his lab coat, came up one smooth move and injected me in the right side of the neck. And I immediately, my body just immediately went into trauma. That was about the end of what I looked at in the session with Bud Hopkins. But I did pick it up so I can continue with what happened, because I did pick it up later in the other hypnosis session with Gloria Hawker in 2003.
Okay, but just for the benefit of being with Bud Hopkins, because everyone will know that name, and certainly. What happened with him at, you revealed this much. He clearly saw that there was more to come, I assume?
He did. It's just I was so tense, and I was having such a difficult time under hypnosis. I was having just an incredible headache came up with looking at this data. And Bud kept giving me suggestions to try to make it go away, but it didn't really. It would diminish and then it would just come back in force. And the headache was just splitting. And the headache lasted 3 days after the session. And I have to wonder if that was programmed in. Should she ever start make her have a headache, you know, or something? I don't know.
Yeah.
But
so how did you part with Bud at that point?
We parted on really good terms. I was very grateful to him for helping shed some light into this area. And I had a hard time accepting it at first because it was so incredibly cruel. And I just wasn't prepared for that. I thought, how does this happen in the United States of America, land of the free and home of the brave? And my whole idea of the country I lived in and had gone in the military to serve just started going up in smoke at that point. So I started going to all the lectures I could attend, all the contactee groups and abductee groups, and anybody that had anything going on. In Las Vegas, there fortunately was quite a bit of that. And I went everywhere I could, and I met a woman named Misha Johnston, who is really a good friend of Melinda Leslie, and I finally reconnected with her. And she connected me with all kinds of people, James Barclay, and some other people that had similar experiences. She told me about MilAbs, because I had never heard of MilAbs up until having the hypnosis. I'd never heard of such things. And so I was really disturbed. And so I kept going around checking out all this information, and to my horror, I found more corroborating data than not. And
so, but at that point, did you get, you met with another person, a regression hypnosis person?
It took me years to get
to the next step.
To the point where I could even go under hypnosis again and look at what else happened.
Really? Okay.
Because it was really difficult. It was like being handed a case of instant post-traumatic stress disorder to deal with it. And there was one group, I have to mention this because it was just made my blood run cold. One group I went to in Las Vegas where we sat in a circle and everybody was sharing about their experiences. And then it came to my experience, and I didn't want to give any details of my experience because I was hoping to hear other details that might confirm my own. And so I said, well, what happened to me is I was taken out in the middle of the desert to test radar on UFOs, and then I think they took me to Area 51 and did a mind wipe procedure on me. And a guy across the room looked at me and he said, did they stick you in the side of the neck with a needle too? And that was exactly what had happened. And I was so terrified, I just wanted the group to end and get in my car and drive away. Now I wish I'd talked to the man, but back then it was like more than I could handle. It was just, my blood ran cold. There was that grave, someone walking on your grave feeling, sinking in quicksand feeling.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So now several years, how many years passed before you went into regression hypnosis again and got more of the story?
Yeah, 9 years.
9 years?
9 years.
Oh, my.
Because it was like chasing around, trying to chase shadows, you know. I met a lot of experiencers who are all trying to put their pieces together and make a coherent picture. And I certainly sympathize with that. But my life up to that point had been about spirituality and meditation and yoga and health food. And I didn't want to be obsessed with the UFO field, and I could see it coming. And I just thought, you know, this is crazy. The ETs aren't talking, and they have major pieces. And the government's not talking, and they have major pieces. And I just thought, the heck with it all. I'm just going to go back to my meditation, and I'm going to wait till Dan Rather announces on the evening news that we have contact, or, you know, this comes out somewhere. You know, I just thought, I'm out of it. I'm not going to let this rule my life. But the essence of a spiritual path is to really know yourself. I'm sure you know that from what I know of you on Project Camelot. And so in my meditation practice and in my life, I keep bumping up against this little black box in the back of my mind where I tucked away all that stuff. And then finally, when Bush became president, when the Supreme Court handed him the presidency and stopped the recount, I was really angry about that, and more aggravated PTSD with what happened under the Bush administration.